Hello, and welcome to another bonus episode of 21st Century Spielberg. I'm Chris Evangelista, a staff writer and critic with SlashFilm.com. And when it comes to this show, the main episodes tend to have just me on them. But for the bonus episodes, I like to bring in some guests. So with me today to talk about Catch Me If You Can and The Terminal is Chauncey Telese. Thanks for being here. Tell the folks at home about yourself.
Hi, I'm a staff writer for LosAngelesFootballNetwork.com, and I write about the Los Angeles Rams. And I'm a lifelong Spielberg fan.
So, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Steven Spielberg? What you feel about him as a filmmaker in general, not just the 21st century films, just in general.
Sure, I first saw Raiders on Laserdisc when I was about 4 years old, and then a year later I saw Jurassic Park, and that hit me like an asteroid. And I've been a lifelong fan of his work, and I still think he's pound for pound one of the top three best filmmakers of all time. And even though people like to say his 21st century films is where he fell off, I strongly disagree. And Catch Me If You Can is even in my top five.
Nice, yeah. That's the origin of this show for me. Is that for the longest time I just saw so many people just talking about how they felt the 21st century films just weren't as good, and that bothered me because I disagree. I do feel like the tide is starting to change on that, so that's a good thing. But it's taken a weirdly long amount of time to get there.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. Let's just launch right into it, and let's start with Catch Me If You Can. So this comes out after Minority Report, after AI. Those are two very dark sci-fi movies where things are really bad for everybody. And then Catch Me If You Can comes along, and it's a complete sea change. It's much brighter. It's much bubblier. It's much more fun.
It's probably his funniest movie. I mean, with that and maybe Raiders. But yeah, it's like the first time in a while where a Spielberg movie's been just funny.
Right, yeah. It's he takes the time to let the movie just be, it's not a straightforward comedy, but it gets pretty close. So, tell me, you said Catch Me If You Can is in the top for you. So tell me, what you feel about this movie in general. Let's get into it.
I'm just really impressed with how many locations he's able to get in and how quickly the production was on it. Because I think the story on that is he had time to do it because pre-production on War of the Worlds ran a little long. And it just amazes me that he's able to do that. I mean, there's so many, all the airports, all the different locations. The last Babyface Leo movie we would get, and then Hanks in an incredible not supporting but co-lead role. Even if his Boston accent's a little shaky, he's incredible in it.
Oh yeah, Tom Hanks is so good in this.
And what a cast too! Like the rest of the supporting cast.
Yeah, it's all, and a lot of them are it's before they blew up. Like Amy Adams shows up.
Yeah,
it's you just watch it and you're like, oh, there's that person and there's that person. So this is obviously it's based on a true story, but it has plenty of embellishments, and I feel like this is the most autobiographical of all Spielberg's movies, even though it's not about him. Obviously,
yes,
it's the one that he seems to be drawing so much from his own life with. Just the main character who's a big dreamer, and he's got issues with his parents. Spielberg daddy issues are always a big thing.
Oh yeah.
And this is a bit of a change for him, which I think is so interesting because up until this point, a lot of the fathers in Spielberg films are absentee fathers, or they're bad fathers. And, that's because Spielberg, for the longest time, he blamed his father for the breakup of his parents. And then later he learned that really the breakup happened because his mother fell in love with someone else, fell in love with a family friend, which is also what happens in this movie. But what I find really interesting about this film, as far as the daddy issues go, is this feels like the first film in the Spielberg lineup of daddy issues where he gives the dad character played by Christopher Walken some sort of he gives him sympathy. The character is kind of a loser and kind of a con artist, and he doesn't have the best life, but you can feel a sympathy towards him that you don't really get from the other bad fathers in Spielberg's lineup. A lot of them have to learn a lesson first, and this one there's just a sort of a melancholy sympathy there for Christopher Walken, and Walken's performance is just so good.
Yeah, his speech at the Rotary Club is an all timer for me. And just him trying to, the trick with the jeweler with the necklace, and then just trying to like sadly convince the bank to let him loan money, and he keeps trying to say, "But the Rotary Club, the Rotary Club," and man, poor guy, like you can just tell he's like at the end of his rope.
Yeah, and Christopher Walken, he's one of those actors who's he's sort of like slipped into sort of self-parody. Even though I love him, he tends to sort of just, you see him and it's like, oh, there's Christopher Walken, and he's doing his Christopher Walken thing. But he's doing a lot of different work here. Like, I don't want to say like, oh, he's actually acting, because he's always acting, but it's a lot more subtle of a performance.
And Spielberg lets him dance too, which that's always a treat when you get to see Walken dance, because he's a professional dancer, or was.
Yes. Yeah, and it's I feel like when everyone found out Christopher Walken could dance again, they started sort of like shoehorning it into the films. Like, we got to get Walken dancing, but it feels more organic here. It feels like, oh, that belongs in this movie.
And then his the speech about how he met his mother in France, Leo's mother in France, and during the war is like really charming too.
Oh yeah, it's so good. And then of course he eventually just dies off screen.
I know,
falling down some steps.
I know.
So even this film, with that in mind, even though it's a bubblier film, it's a funnier film, even this still has that melancholy underneath it. And I wonder if like it's just impossible at this point for Spielberg to get away from that. Because it's just the era of the 21st century has sort of changed him in a way where even when he's trying to make a fun, quote unquote, light movie, it still has these very dark undertones to it.
That happens with age. That happens. I mean, even though Scorsese's movies are usually kind of grim, they got a lot grimmer as he's gotten older, like The Irishman, for instance, where it's very melancholy and contemplative, because that's just what happens when you get older.
Yeah. Yeah. So so what makes Catch Me If You Can so good to you? What makes it rank up there for you?
I, for one, love Leo just being super charming and also just out of his element in a lot of ways, but he's just able to always circle it back. Like even the beginning when he's writing his name on the chalkboard, just Abagnale, not Abagnale, or just when he's conning himself into to be a doctor, and he's watching Perry Mason learn how to be a lawyer. Like, right. Just all the little stuff, and then plus his back and forth with Hanks is incredible. Like, even though they don't share the screen much, or they're a lot less than you'd think, it's still amazing watching them go after, the pursuit. The pursuit is so well done, and John Williams' score is incredible, and the opening titles always get me.
Yeah,
like it's just so fun.
Yeah, they have that Saul Bass quality to them. The whole movie has that throwback feel to it. Even the Williams score, which is so jazzy and fun. And yeah, the Hanks Leo thing, it really is what drives the entire movie. And I love the way Spielberg finds ways to get them to interact without having them be in the same room. They have that yearly phone call on Christmas.
Oh boy, it's so sad.
It is. It's very sad because, as Hanks' character points out, the DiCaprio's character has no one else to call. The only person he has in his life he can shoot the breeze with is the guy who's trying to put him in jail for the rest of his life.
And Hanks is in the same boat. We don't really understand what's going on in his life until a little bit later, but he's also a very lonely person. That's why he's in the office on Christmas, and no one in the office understands what he does or respects him. Like when he's trying to teach him what a fraudulent check is, and oh, that's what a routing number is, and he's just so upset.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that Hanks' character. We eventually learn that he's estranged from his family too, and these characters they oddly need each other, and that again is another father issue thing. And I feel like this entire movie is sort of like therapy for Spielberg, working through all those father issues once and for all. Because even though Spielberg and his father were estranged for a very long time, his wife Kate Capshaw convinced him to bury the hatchet, so to speak. And they got close again. And Spielberg said, one of his biggest regrets was getting estranged from his father, and one of the best things he ever did was reuniting with him. And I feel like this is the movie he's working all that through with, because again, the mother character, even though Spielberg doesn't dislike his mother, obviously, but the mother character is the one who leaves, and it's really the father figures that DiCaprio's character turns to here. Even after Walken is gone, Hanks becomes the de facto father figure. And that also is something Spielberg has had in his real life, where he's had, older Hollywood executives who nurtured him early in his career and helped him become the mogul he is today.
And he talks about that a lot in his HBO doc. I remember, there's a huge Catch Me If You Can portion of it, because he talks about how, like you said, that his wife convinced him to bury the hatchet, and it's really neat to see him work that out. And I do love that Hanks and Leo have a very Principal Skinner, Bart Simpson relationship throughout. And
yes.
I love that. And when Hanks figures out he's a kid because the Barry Allen is one of his aliases, I just love that. He's just so happy. He's like, oh, he's a kid. Thank God he's a kid.
Yes. Yeah, this movie, every time I come back to Catch Me If You Can, I'm just always reminded of how well it fires on all cylinders. This really is one of Spielberg's best. And even the ending, I know a lot of people have problems with Spielberg endings. That's a topic for another day, but I think he really sticks the ending here. I love that setup where Hanks's character, he sees that Leo's going to try and run again, and rather than stop him, he says, I'm going to let you go because I know you're going to come back. And that's both funny and also a little sad, because again, it's DiCaprio's character realizing he really has no one else left to turn to, and he accepts his fate. And I really love that ending, even though it's both amusing and kind of depressing.
I know. And Catch Me If You Can also has one of the best Spielberg F-bombs ever. Like when Hanks is telling the knock-knock joke. Yes. I can watch that on a loop.
Yeah, that's and it's so well set up. And then he there's that callback to it later where he doesn't go through the whole thing. That's great. So, and after Catch Me If You Can comes The Terminal. And these movies, they sort of, they complement each other in a lot of ways. And they're one sort of a reflection of the other. They both have Tom Hanks, obviously. They both have a lot to do with airports. But whereas Catch Me If You Can is, this throwback nostalgia trip, The Terminal is set in the present day. And Spielberg doesn't really do a lot of present day movies. The majority of his films are either the future or the past. And obviously he has present day movies, but the bulk of his stuff is primarily dealing with different eras. And it's always a little interesting when he checks back in with the 21st century.
I know, and what's unfortunate with The Terminal is if Spielberg detractors say, well, Catch Me If You Can's the one good one he had in the 21st century. This is the one they always turn to. It's see, he fell off. The Terminal has so many of the bad Spielberg ticks that I think it rubbed people the wrong way. Obviously, the way they say well, Always is his one bad one of the 80s, or Hook is the one Hook or Amistad of the bad ones of the 90s. And The Terminal's not as bad as people made it out to be. I mean, sure, it's a little too maudlin in places, but it actually has a lot of good stuff in it.
Yeah, I really enjoy The Terminal. It's a sweet movie. I also like that even though it's a one location film, Spielberg pulls out all the stops and he sort of gives it this old school Hollywood feel where it's they're on a big Hollywood set, and he gets to build an entire world within this airport. And one of my favorite moments in this movie is there's that shot where after Tom Hanks' character, learns he has no country at this point, he's just stuck in the terminal. Spielberg he has the camera on a wire, and he pulls it back and up, and it just goes up into the air, and it shows the entire world of the terminal around Tom Hanks. And it's such a great shot because Tom Hanks gets swallowed up in this bustling crowd and stuff like that. That's I don't know. It just makes me go, ah, yes, I love movies. Just watching Spielberg do like tricks like that, and I feel like The Terminal doesn't get enough credit. Is it one of his best movies? No, but it deserves more than it got.
And it's really smartly cast. I mean, Stanley Tucci makes everything at least 5% better just by him being there. Catherine Zeta-Jones is good in it. And I think that it works really well as like a series of vignettes centered around Victor Naborsky.
Yeah, and Hanks is so good in this too. You know, it's always tricky when an actor has to do an accent like that, and it easily could have slipped into parody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could have been like Latka Gravis from Taxi, but I really think Hanks does a really good job of making this accent work as like you can't really place where it's from, but it doesn't sound completely forced. I mean, it's always going to sound a little forced because we know Tom Hanks is so well known and we know how he's supposed to sound. So anytime he changes his voice, it's going to be like, oh, that's different. But I think he makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, his accents aren't his strong suit. I mean, Catch Me If You Can, as much as I love it, people always say how bad his Boston accent is in it, but that's okay. Like, it's still Hanks being charming, just with a different voice.
Yeah. And to go back to the Stanley Tucci character, I love that he's a complex villain. He's the villain, quote unquote, of the film, but he's not really a terrible guy. He's just doing his job, basically. And yeah, he wants to climb the ladder and get a promotion, but I do like the way that the script allows him to seem more well-rounded than just like this one-note bureaucrat.
Right, and he's in as toughest spot as Victor is, because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? There's no precedent or protocol for this, and that's why he early on, like, he kind of lets him do the thing with the carts where he's getting change back so he can go get Burger King. Like, he lets him do that for a while, and like he does give Victor a little bit of rope, because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just let him starve in the terminal?
Right. No, sorry, go ahead.
No, just like, yeah, he's in as tough a spot as Victor, and that's what's really interesting about it. He could have just been,
even at the end, I love that he literally just lets him go. He's like, all right, we got other things to deal with. There's a moment where he tries to stop him, but he eventually gives in. And I really appreciate that. But like I said, this isn't the best Spielberg movie. As much as I like this movie, as much as I like a lot of stuff in it, I do feel like, as well cast as it is, all of the Terminal characters are just a little bit too quirky and for my taste. Like, they all have their own little quirks. Like, Zoe Saldana's character loves Star Trek, and Diego Luna's character loves her, and the janitor is deliberately making people fall on the floor. And I get wanting to give those side characters something else to do, but they're just all just a little too quirky for the realism that Spielberg's going for here.
Right. And when you work at the clip that he does, because I mean, to put out, Private Ryan, AI, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, and The Terminal in that short of a time span, I mean, they're not all going to be winners. And
no, absolutely not.
And it's probably his last, lighter movie until maybe Tintin. Because after this, it gets super dark for a while. Even with Crystal Skull, it's still dark. Sorry,
go ahead.
No, to say, so this is kind of his last more effervescent movie before he starts really turning it on. So you kind of have to appreciate it a little.
Yeah, it's like he's getting all the sunshine out of him with both Catch Me If You Can and Terminal back to back, because he's clearing the way for the much darker stuff to come.
His 2005 particularly is super dark.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I do wish people would give The Terminal another shot. I especially feel like I wish people would watch it back to back with Catch Me If You Can, because I feel like if you do that, it makes you appreciate The Terminal just a little bit more.
And even in movies that don't work, he's always experimenting. Like you said with that shot in The Terminal where it's the camera on the wire, or even like War Horse, where it's the camera on the horse's head and it's the point of view of the horse running. Like, he's always doing something incredible, even in movies that don't work.
Absolutely. Like, a quote unquote bad Spielberg movie is usually better than most other people's films in general, just because he has such a grasp of how to make movies. He has movie sense, as Pauline Kael said. He's a walking encyclopedia of filmmaking, and there's been so much said about how he edits movies in his head while he's shooting them. He knows exactly where he wants his shots to be. Other filmmakers, they find their film in the edit, and Spielberg finds it while, before he even begins shooting. He knows exactly what he wants, and the amount of time between films is remarkable. Just how he's just churning out these movies one on top of the other, literally just going from one film to the next. And I can't think of another filmmaker, from our era who works like he does.
Exactly, and they're all different kinds of films. I mean, they're huge. The huge movies like Minority Report or AI, and then smaller ones like The Terminal. And to do all that, in such a short amount of time is so difficult. Whereas like other filmmakers, it could take them like 5 years to make one movie, and like that's something that doesn't get talked about as much. Is just the clip that he works at and how efficient everything is, and nothing ever feels slapdash. Even in The Terminal, everything feels like it's purposeful, even if it doesn't ultimately work. And that's the thing about even 21st century Spielberg is he gets so good at making movies, we just take him for granted. And it's a little too cool for school to like him now, I guess, considering like all the people that came out of the 90s. So Spielberg, I think, does get taken for granted a lot, especially now.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this project in general, because not only is Spielberg a great filmmaker in terms of, entertaining people, he's got something to say. These movies are him doing more than just creating pieces of pop entertainment. And especially in the 21st century, I feel like this is like his most diverse, interesting lineup, where he's just trying so many different genres and so many different approaches, and sometimes working outside his comfort zone. And I really, I don't want to get too bleak, but I feel like Steven Spielberg is one of those directors, like we're going to miss him so much when he's gone. So many people just take him for granted, like, he's the guy who makes blockbusters. But there's so much, there's so much more to it. And, I don't want to, I do not look forward to living in some sort of world where Steven Spielberg isn't constantly working.
I know, and even now he's still constantly working. I mean, to put out Ready Player One, West Side Story, and The Post in a short clip is very incredible.
Yeah, The Post especially. He shot that so quickly, and that's obviously a topic for a different show.
Sure.
I think that I love that movie. It's another movie I feel like a lot of people were like, he's as Spielberg on autopilot, and I'm like, really? I don't think he really has an autopilot.
No,
I feel like it's not possible for him to phone it in. He has to always be working and doing the best he possibly can. He's never going to just like, whatever. He's going to give it his all no matter what.
Exactly. And it really rounds out his Civics trilogy, which is pretty cool to squeeze in a trilogy of of related topics but unrelated movies into a span too. No one noticed it.
Yeah.
Because you get Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, and The Post, and it's like, there's a whole thing about civics looped into his filmography. That's pretty neat.
It is, and people even take that for granted, where it's like, those movies are too preachy, and I want to jump through the screen and hit them and say, you're missing out on something great here.
I know. So, even though Bridge of Spies, written by the Coen brothers, still couldn't get love for Bridge of Spies. That's one of my favorite ones.
That's another very funny movie for Spielberg.
Yeah, Lincoln's hilarious.
Yes,
people it's too much of a stage play. It's like, well, also it happens to be funny. I can watch the Ethan Allen story in a loop.
Oh my god, that scene is so good. That script by Tony Kushner is just phenomenal. And yeah, that could have been a stuffy biopic, and instead it's this very emotional, charming, funny portrait of Lincoln, and it's not a cradle to the grave biopic. It's just about a time in his life. And
Catch Me If You Can, to The Terminal, the cast is just loaded. It's ridiculous. And
that movie has everyone in it.
And one thing I forgot to say about Catch that I really like is it's Spielberg's James Bond movie without it being a James Bond movie. Like
Yes.
that's really fun. Like where Leo's pretending to be, James Bond, and even as the theme song, he's at the car. Like, it's really cool watching Spielberg getting to work out stuff that he can't otherwise do. Because like he'll
Yes.
obviously never be invited to make a James Bond movie, but he gets to do it. It's really fun, and I do love the moments where he's actually like wanting to be with Amy Adams' family. That stuff is great.
Oh yeah. That whole section of the film with Martin Sheen shows up, and he's another father figure in the film, and you feel really bad for the Amy Adams character
I
because
know.
she's clearly in love with him, and he seems to love her, but he has to keep running. He can never stop.
Like, it's just so sad, and they're sitting at the couch, and I don't know what program they're watching. I know it's like a religious program, right? When they're singing the song, and he has to like kind of figure it out and just kind of humming along.
Yes.
Oh man, like he's just so out of his depth, and he's just trying to hold it all together.
It's yeah. All right. So real quick now before we wrap things up, tell me what your favorite Steven Spielberg movie is. If you had to pick one. And I know that's tough.
It's so basic, but Jaws. Like
That's
every year watching the Fourth of July without fail.
oh, me too. I'm probably gonna watch it this weekend too, just because
I know.
it's Memorial Day. There's nowhere to go.
Exactly, it's a perfect summer movie. Like, that is the summer movie people have been chasing for decades.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it gave birth to the summer movies, and Jaws is one of those movies. There, no matter how many times I watch it, and I have to have seen it 100 times at this point, probably more than that. I never get sick of it. Like, if it's on TV and I come across it, I have to like stop and just keep watching it, just because it hooks you, it draws you in.
And you notice new things each time, like even just small little things. And it's a really great teaching tool of like, hey, your movie could be a total disaster, but it could turn into Jaws. And it's one of the rare ones. And it's one of the rare ones where the movie's way better than the book.
Oh yes, absolutely. Now on the complete opposite side of the coin, and what is your least favorite Spielberg movie if you had to pick one?
Oh God, it's either I would probably just say Always, even though I probably should revisit it because I've only seen it like once or twice. So it's either Always or The Terminal, maybe Hook. It's one of those three.
You don't have the built-in nostalgia for Hook that so many people have.
I did, and then like I've revisited it since, and I'm like, oh, I can't. Yeah, I can't defend it. Like, I have a friend who absolutely loves Hook, but I'm like, I can't. Like, when's the last time you've watched it? It's not good. And I get it's an admirable effort. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah, Hook is one of those movies I remember when I was a kid, it was a huge deal, and then you revisit it. I feel like everything in Hook works until they get to Neverland. Like, all the early stuff in the real world, that stuff is solid. And then the minute it gets to Neverland, it turns into the Goonies 2.0. And the Goonies is another one of those movies where when you're a kid, you love it, but I feel like, from my point of view, I revisited it as an adult, and I'm like, oh my God, I hate this movie. These kids will not stop yelling over each other.
know.
I don't want to sit through this.
I know. It's one of those I like, but it's not going to be in the regular rotation anytime soon. Like, when my daughter's old enough to watch it, sure, but like, I'm not going to like put on Goonies on a Saturday night.
No.
But I will say with Hook, I mean, it's another one of those like say what you want, but like the production design is really good in it. And they does have some good stuff. Like, Bob Hoskins is fantastic in it.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah,
even
again,
bad Spielberg is still better than most people's best movies.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't really touch him. Really, you can't. No one compares to Steven Spielberg, at least in my humble opinion.
Me too. And every once in a while I was like, like he fell off. Like, no, he didn't. He evolved. Like, it's not always going to be Jurassic Park or Raiders. It's going to be different stuff, but really well made. Like, even Tintin, like, as far as motion capture movies go, like, that's a very good, admirable effort. I mean, no one else has been able to do motion capture that well since, maybe Avatar. But other than that, it's a very short list of movies where that works.
Yeah, Robert Zemeckis, his whole thing for the last few years has been motion capture, and those movies are not good. I don't want to watch them. And Spielberg seems to be the only person to have figured out how to really make that entertaining and thrilling and make it seem like it's a movie and not just an experiment.
Yeah, and because he can see movies as movies, he can just play. He can play with any type of technology, and it just kind of. I kind of wonder what would have happened if Tintin had ultimately worked, because then he probably would have been able to do more with it. I mean, he kind of goes back to with Ready Player One a little, but still, like it's kind of an interesting fork in the road for him.
Yeah, I do wonder, even though I love. I like the way the motion capture works. I often wonder, like, if he had tried to do that live action, if the reaction would have been better. I mean, Tintin is sort of disadvantaged in America just because he's not as popular a character in America as he is everywhere else in the world. But I feel like if Spielberg had found a way to make that live action, it would have caught more attention. But maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know.
Well, it's him wanting to play with 3D too, because I think he hasn't had any since the 3D boom, except for that and Ready Player One.
Yeah, that too.
And I will say that with Tintin, like it kind of has a little bit of an American following because the show is on Nickelodeon all the time. Well, not all the time, but like I remember early in the morning, I'd wake up, oh wait, what's this Tintin? This is fun. But yeah, you're right, not a huge following because it's a European.
Yeah, it's a very European. Yeah, but I remember that too, where I would get up for school and Tintin is on at 6 a.m. Like, let's watch Tintin at 6 a.m.
And I do love that Tintin cost Simon Pegg the ability to be an Inglourious Basterds. It's always a funny little note to me.
Yes.
Because I think he was supposed to be the Fassbender part, but he's like, I want to work with Spielberg instead. And it was Tintin. Sorry, I just thought of that.
No, that's great. That's the stuff I'm looking for. All right. Well, thank you, Chauncey, for coming on the show. If you want to tell people where they can find you online, please do it right now.
Sure. If you're a fan of the LA Rams, I'm at lafbnetwork.com, and on Twitter, I'm at BigChaunce64. Thank you so much for having me. I love reading your 21st Century Spielberg pieces, and I'm loving the show. I can't get enough of it, man.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. All right. So new episodes of 21st Century Spielberg are published twice a month. You can also read more about the topics covered here on slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to 21st Century Spielberg on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, and all other popular podcast apps. Please rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word. It helps. I'm Chris Evangelista, and you can find me on Twitter at CEvangelista413 and on this podcast Twitter at Spielberg2K.